Hi, this is John Pettigrew, and you're listening to Talking Through My Hat, a podcast that explores bookish businesses, the fantastic people who create them, and what those people have learned. I'm a hat wearer, a recovering editor, and the creator of Futureproofs, enabling editors and authors to work better online. To find out more, visit wearefutureproofs.com or follow me on Twitter at John_Pettigrew. Welcome to this week's Talking Through My Hat. Today I'm talking with Kate Wilson, founder and managing director at multi-award-winning children's publisher Nosy. Before that, she was a managing director at Scholastic and at Macmillan Children's Books. So welcome to the podcast, Kate.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's a pleasure. So Nosy, we were just having a little bit of a chat beforehand. It's such a fixture now. It almost seems odd that you're so new. You're just 7 years old in your 8th year. How do you actually describe Nosy to anyone who hasn't heard of you? Unlikely as that sounds.
It's all too likely. And I guess it's important for us to think about this because we're expanding our customer base the whole time, particularly internationally. Mm-hmm. So we describe ourselves as a multi-award-winning, child-focused, parent-friendly publisher of children's books.
And where did that come from? Because I said you were working at Scholastic before you did this. You had a safe corporate job. You know, you had the salary, everything was mapped out in career and that kind of stuff, presumably. Why did you make this leap to, not just find your own business, but of all things, found a publisher?
Well, actually, you've missed out a critical bit. Ooh. Because I worked for Macmillan for 10 years, very happily. I was the managing director of the children's division there, and then I was the group managing director of Scholastic in the UK. But then I went to Hachette. I was headhunted to run an adult publishing business in Hachette. And I was fired after 5 months. So actually, I didn't have a safe corporate job. I didn't have a job at all. And so that's the unvarnished truth of it. So I didn't have a job. But doing that adult job certainly made me think about, I guess, two things. One was, I think it would be fair to say, my fairly constant theme of the challenge of being managed. I think I felt that I wasn't necessarily a natural employee. It turned out, and that had perhaps become truer the older I got, or maybe I was less willing to suppress more bullshit elements of myself, something like that. Anyway, I thought quite hard about corporates and about my experience within corporates, but it also made me think very hard about what I valued in children's publishing. I valued the community of children's publishing. I valued the content. I valued, and this is all going to get a bit tautological or meta, I valued the values. I realized that I really cared about the way that children's publishers have a freedom to think very hard about what it is we put into the hands of our readers. Mm-hmm. And we all care a lot about what we put into the hands of our readers. And so that sense that you are really thinking about something that you believe is worthwhile and does good in the world turned out to be an under-articulated motivator for me. And so faced with thinking about what I wanted to do, the answers were not have a boss and work in children's books again.
Okay. Which narrows your options a little bit.
It did a bit. It really did. So there it was. And I felt that now was the moment. I suppose I was in my mid-40s. And again, I sort of felt if I don't do this now, I don't really quite know when I would do it.
Yeah. So how did you kind of go about it? Did you just go, I've got a great book, I'm going to publish it? Or was there a lot of planning that went into it? Did you gather a cadre of people? What was your approach to actually making that step?
There was a lot of planning, and there was also a lot of gut. So I've told this story before, in fact, on a blog post. But I was sent out of a company that fired me doing that kind of walk of shame with the cardboard box with the photos of the kids and the BlackBerry until Monday morning and not much else. And that was on a Friday. And on that Friday night, or the Saturday morning at about 3, I nudged my husband, who's a publisher too, awake and said, I'm going to set up a children's publishing company in the basement. That's what we're going to do. And he said, okay then, and didn't say go back to sleep. He said what that looked like. And so we had the very, 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 very basic bits of a business plan. I suppose we'd done some sums by the next morning. And that was the point at which my younger child came in, saw the, teacups and saucers and coffee cups and things, the bits of paper on the bed, and said, what's happening? And I said, well, remember, Mummy was fired. Well, we're going to do a publishing company of our own in the basement. And she said, you will fail. Very vividly.
The confidence of one's family.
This will not work. Get a job, she said. Anyway, so I was a bit daunted by that and by other things. And so to suggest it was a very linear progress with making Nosy a reality would be untrue. I did explore whether or not I could get a corporate job. Sometimes I thought and thought, I can't possibly do this. She says I'm a publishing company. I'm mad. So I didn't keep the faith completely. I can't say I kept faith completely. I did have this idea of Nosy Crow that we I kept returning to. We kept returning to. My husband kept returning to as well. He was retired at that point. Not anymore. But so we did quite a lot of business planning.
Yeah.
Business planning for our own certainty, and also because we were pretty clear that we had a vision of something of a scale that would require outside investment. And so the next stage, or there were two things that happened then simultaneously. One was that we put it about that we were interested in having some investors, and we ended up, this is a friends and family thing, so we ended up with two friends who did invest in the company and who remain together with me, Adrian, my husband, Camilla Reed, about whom more in a second, and these two other individuals who are outside, who don't work within the company. We are still the shareholders and the only shareholders of the company from the beginning, which is terrific. We haven't had to go back and seek other investment. And I think that suggests that the investment choices we made at the beginning were absolutely the right ones.
Yeah.
For all sorts of reasons, they were the right ones. I mentioned Camilla Reed. So the other thing that was happening simultaneously was that we were thinking about what a program might look like. I'm editorially engaged. I'm not an editor. I don't have patience to be an editor, and I'm too bossy. So neither of those things work well for editors, I think. And so I knew I needed someone who would come and make some books. And my role at that stage, I was very much defining as a sales, marketing and brand PR role. And of course, I wanted to touch the books more than I had been touching the books at later stages in my career, particularly Elastic. It's a very big job and involved book clubs and book fairs and educational publishing as well as trade publishing. I felt very, very distant from the books themselves, and I wanted to get back to really being in contact with the books. And I am still very much in contact with them. But Camilla and I had worked together at Macmillan. She had run Campbell Books for me, and I knew that one of the things I wanted to focus on was books for babies and toddlers. And I had never worked with anyone with a better sense of books for babies and toddlers than Camilla. Camilla at that point was writing and coming up with concepts and looking after her two relatively young children. So that was all. I was fired at the beginning of October. I went to Frankfurt that year with no plan. But by the January of the following year, we had formed the company. And on February the 22nd of 2011, we announced our existence. So it took however many months that is, 5 months, I guess, start to finish, fire to finish, as it were, to come up with an idea and to have a plan for the first, I think we went to Bologna that year, and we maybe had plans for, I would say, like 10 or 11 books that were formed enough for us to be able to start selling rights in them at that point.
That's reasonably speedy.
Yeah, it was quite quick. It was quick, and I think one of the advantages of setting up a publishing company, having worked for a publishing company, is that you kind of you've got a sense of how long things take. You've got a sense of how you can do things, what things you can do quickly, what things you can't do quickly, what are the important dates to hit.
Yeah.
The fact that Bologna was an important date to hit, for example. So we were reasonably savvy, I think, from that perspective. And it did mean that we were able to deploy all that knowledge we'd learned from, in my case, a quarter of a century of corporate publishing.
And you all seem to have taken quite a broad approach to this thing, telling children's stories from, print books. But you were quite early into ebooks and enhanced ebooks and apps and audiobooks. Was that always a deliberate choice, or was it just the way things developed because you saw the opportunities?
I think it was absolutely a deliberate choice. And before we had an app to sell, we were saying that we were going to make digital products. It just felt that setting up a company in 2011, which was absolutely at a point when things seemed likely to be transforming for children's books in a major way, it felt very retrograde to say, and sort of ostrich-like, to say that digital wouldn't be part of our activity. I also felt that being an independent publisher meant that I had an opportunity to experiment in these areas. And it's never cheap to experiment in these areas, but doing the kinds of experiments that we were doing required a kind of, if you build it, they will come kind of approach, and a trust that things would happen, a kind of vision of things being possible, that I think at a point when you're doing an awful lot of budgety, costly stuff in a corporate environment, it's very easy to lose your bottle if you're doing that. And we chose not to do very much of that. We chose to say, okay, well, we'll just do some of this and see what happens. Not having to explain or justify costs and timings to anyone above me was a great freedom. And I think it was the thing that made the apps brilliant. And I am as proud of the apps we made as I am of anything I've done in my career, I think. They were regularly promoted by Apple. Yeah. The truth is that we weren't able to make them financially viable. And increasingly that became true as the App Store got more cluttered and as parents it seemed less willing to spend money on digital product for children. And we ended up saying, well, we can't keep doing them. I would say that having the experience of making those apps, particularly ebooks and audio too, but particularly the apps, made me a better print publisher. Think harder about what the screen did best and could deliver to children best, and what the page could deliver.
I say one of the things that I've loved about running my own business is that thing that if you have an idea, you can just do it. You still need to cost it. You still need to be clear what you're doing, but it's the justification steps, as you said, that you can avoid.
None of that kind of explication, none of that having to be a buffer for the creative people from somebody else who kind of wants to know stuff that's actually not helpful to be trying to parse at this point in the process.
It just frees you up so much. It gives you so much more time to do the real thing.
All the time. I can't believe, I've had excellent, I married one of my bosses. So I've had really great bosses through my corporate life. I really have. And I'm very fond of many of them. And, I learned so much from everyone I work for, but not the time saved by not having to explain stuff up is just amazing. It's just astonishing. We have achieved so much because that's not something I have to do.
That's the thing of, as I say, learning, taking that corporate experience, but cutting off the cruft and just saying, here's the core of it. Here's the skills and the experience that we've got. How do you go about... we've all got to spend time thinking about how we do things. particularly when you're doing a new business, the stuff you haven't done before, you suddenly have to learn. I mean, how do you go about analysing what you know and what you don't know and propping yourself up? I mean, do you tend to get other people in to shore you up, or are you kind of go to the books, find all the books? Or
I think I had learned so many things from my corporate life, like be very careful of property leases, kind of at the nitty gritty sort of level, through to awareness of some aspects of my own leadership oblique stroke management style. I mean, I was clear that I am best surrounded by people who are not like me. I absolutely need people who are complementary to me, and that was a very important part of the choices I made, particularly initially when it was such a small group. So that was important. So I was very aware of the need that it shouldn't just be, people who share a vision and think the same way of doing a thing, because I think that's catastrophic. You need people who will say, well, what? Yes. You want to do what? And of course, I brought 25 years of a sort of sense of what might and what might not work in different markets to the business. So those are all sort of givens. Things that I didn't have were so many. I mean, an ability to unblock lavatories, that turned out to be really key at various points. So kind of really mechanical things. How do you get post picked up? Can you get post picked up? At what point in your trajectory are you big enough to have post pick? I mean, the sort of the expectation that you have in a corporate environment of stuff being there, phones being there, desks being there, loos functioning. I think I've touched on that. It's being picked up. Touched on that as well. All of those sorts of things I had no idea how to do. I had relatively little idea of how to value the input of people working within the company, the kind of sweat equity component of the business. I'd never had to do that. And we didn't take anything resembling market rate salaries at the beginning of the life of the business. So how did you value that in the context of the investment mix? That was an important question I hadn't really thought about. I didn't know how. I'd always worked in companies that had distribution, for example, and indeed sales infrastructures in place. And suddenly I was moving into a situation where that wasn't the case. How was I going to deal with those kinds of things? I wasn't coming at this with no understanding of the industry. Again, I must emphasize that. So it's not like I, was brilliant and
you know the questions to ask, but not necessarily where the answers lie.
I don't really got the answers. Yeah. So I think there was an awful lot I didn't know. In terms of how I found that out, I had this incredible sort of entry into the world of independent publishing. And I have found their generosity astonishing. So for me, the Independent Publishers Guild, becoming a member of the Independent Publishers Guild, making friends with individual independent publishers within the guild and outside actually, has been so important to me. And there's been an honesty, not in a kind of cartel-y way, but an honesty about those discussions, a frankness about those discussions, a willingness to share that has been hugely important to me. And I've learned so much from people who are much further down the road of independent publishing, often not children's independent publishing, but down the road of independent publishing than I am. And that's always fantastic. I found myself thinking also about who were people in the children's publishing arena who were really inspiring to me, not to copy them, but to acknowledge their excellence. So I would say the people who've inspired me have been Monty Bhatia and the rest of the management team at Little Tiger. I think what they've achieved is astonishing. I think he's a remarkable individual. I think that's a remarkable organization. Peter Osborne, who I think was, continues to be the touchstone of children's publishing, of international children's publishing success. What he's made is the most enviable thing. And it's amazing seeing the maturity of that business and how it's gone through different sorts of stages. So I think those two. I think Klaus Plugger and his tenacity to his original publishing vision, the things he chooses to do, the things he chooses not to do. But editorially, I find him extremely admirable. And I think finally, and actually perhaps most influentially, the idea of, not even the memory of, but the idea of Sebastian Walker. And I have read maybe 4 times since I started Nosy Crow his sister, Mirabelle Cecil, who is a biographer, his sister's biography of him called A Kind of Prospero, which is available secondhand most of the time, I think. Don't know if there's a new edition of it. And just that, I found that him as a personality extraordinarily compelling, but just that sense of the successes, failures, ambitions, compromises, pitfalls of running an innovative, independent children's publishing company.
Fantastic. So when you think about Nosy Crow and kind of what you've done over the last 7 or 8 years, you know the trajectory you've taken. As you're thinking about the next 5 years, the next 7 years, what sort of things are you thinking about? Okay, I want to make sure this business is still there. It's bigger than it is. It's more successful than it is. Whatever those things mean to you.
I think it's so banal, but it's books and people, isn't it? It's books and people. So making sure that we are careful, we are clear about the thing that we do. We have a phrase that we kind of deploy, which is that whether something is of the crow. So a really good book could come in and we might all discuss it and we might all love it, but we might end up saying, yeah, but it's not of the crow. It's not of the crow. It doesn't feel something that fits our market profile. It's maybe a little bit more orientated to adults than it is to children. It may be a bit more collectory than child focused. It may not be parent friendly enough. We're quite squeaky clean in terms of what we do. We stop at 12. There is no drugs. There is no sex, no rock and roll. And that's, in the books as well. It's an important part of our ethos is embodied in the books. And I think that we have a quite strong, not necessarily always articulated sense of what those things are that make something a Nosy Crow book. So I think we need to be true to what a Nosy Crow book is, but we've been able to think carefully about how to diversify from our original publishing plan. And I guess that will continue. So 2 recent relative innovations were the partnership deals that we struck with the National Trust and the British Museum. And they gave us a way into non-fiction, which was not something that we've been doing before. Now that we're in non-fiction, whatever that means, through those partnerships, we're now starting to do some partnership branded books, so just Nosy Crow non-fiction. So we're always thinking, how do we grow from what that heartland is? How do we diversify products from that heartland? So I think that's a key aspect of it. And so finding the right books and making sure that those books fit broadly with the things that we think we do well and that we understand and that fit consumer and customer understanding of the brand, that feels critical. The other thing is just hiring really good people. Which is tricky and gets trickier as I exhaust people that I've worked with before and things because that has been very much our foundation. As a lot of the senior staff are people who I had exposure to one way or another, usually because I'd worked with them before. And now I think we need to acknowledge that we actually need some outside, some people from outside with different visions. So working out, how do you stay true to that original vision while bringing in new books, new products, and new product kind of categories, I suppose, and new blood, new ideas is one of the challenges that we face. But the thing that I see is the thing that will give us health in the future.
Yeah, that's great. So you talked earlier about, I say, the business is learning to grow and to grow out. You talked earlier about the stuff that you already knew about yourself when you set out, what your personality was like, how to complement it and this kind of thing. You're 7 years down the road now. What have you learned about yourself in that time? Do you still see yourself much the same way? Have you, found out new things about yourself?
There is a risk, I think, and one is aware of this, that being an independent publisher or an entrepreneur of any kind can kind of license your inner demon. You need to, I think, watch out for that. And so I am maybe a more pronounced, frighteningly, version of what I was, if anything. And I do have to think about how to keep that in check, because not all the things about me are good. And so
all strengths have a concomitant weakness, don't they?
So I think that just I'm aware that it brings out some things that were perhaps more latent in me or more controlled in me in a corporate context because they kind of couldn't come out. So you just need to be a bit careful about not giving them absolutely free rein. I suppose that's a thing in terms of my awareness of myself. Otherwise, I think I came to this at 45 or 46. I mean, there is a bit of old dog, no new tricks here. I think I was sort of the person I was. I think I've stopped trying to be a different person. I mean, which is the sort of flip side. I mean, the balance to saying, and I can't be, a ludicrously exaggerated version of myself. But I think I've also come to the conclusion that I am able to do certain things reasonably well. I am reasonably successful, and, beating myself up about myself all the time is sort of not necessarily a good thing or not necessarily a useful thing.
Excellent. And what's the thing that, you're in amidst all of this change and this growth and all these decisions you have to make, what's the thing that keeps you coming back every day to Nosy Crow and sitting at your desk and doing this stuff?
Making things. I like making things. And I like that from making our press release through to making our book and above all, making our company. I like making things.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, Kate. That's been a really fantastic conversation.
Good. I'm glad you liked it.
Thanks very much again to Kate for spending that time having that conversation. I always love that story of hers, of turning a professional crisis into an opportunity, and the importance of not hanging about, that planning, preparation and execution, although they're vitally important, they needn't take a long time if you kind of know what you're about and where you're trying to get to. And for Kate, of course, it's the importance of knowing yourself, playing to your own strengths, and hiring people who complement you, not just people who share your vision, because that can be catastrophic. You need people who are going to question and challenge you. And of course, also, Nosy Crow has grown by leaps and bounds over the years, but everyone has failures and things that don't go so well. And the fact that she still clearly sees that something that's been a commercial failure can still be a source of great pride for her and for the business, and that the discipline of creating digital products can teach you more about how to build your print products. So thanks very much to Kate for that. Please do, if you've enjoyed this podcast, subscribe. You can get it on Apple Podcasts or indeed anywhere you get your podcasts. Do give us a like or a review, please. It helps other people to find the podcast. And I hope to see you again next week. This was Talking Through My Hat, a podcast by John Pettigrew, founder of We Are Futureproofs. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a review at Apple Podcasts or by commenting on the website, myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. You can subscribe to this channel at Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is from hooksounds.com.